You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, we kind of have a returning guest. He was on Fridays with me and JJ, and we had a great time, and I wanted to get him back on the show again. But before we get to Doc Brown, Prometheus Lens podcast, I'll introduce the other rejects joining me today. We got Jin, the motherfucking ninja. What's up, Jin? How are you?
Hey, boss. What's up? Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you to Doc Brown, Justin, for as a guest, and thank you, JJ, my fellow reject. So I'm looking forward to it. This wouldn't happen if it wasn't for you guys, so appreciate it.
Of course, no, thank you for joining us, man. And JJ Vance, not the vice president. What is going on, buddy?
Nick, greetings, sir. Always great to join you here for another Occult Rejects show here. And Jen, same to you as well, sir. Always appreciate your insight into these matters we discuss here on the Occult Rejects. JJ Vance, not the vice president, host of Operation GCD, resident true crime expert over here at the Occult Rejects. Justin, I definitely enjoyed meeting you last time on the Friday, so looking forward to hearing more about your book today and getting into these discussions. So great to see you, bud.
Hell yeah. Thank you very much for joining us again, JJ. And last but not least, the man of the hour and a half, or how long this takes, Doc Brown from Prometheus Lens. Sir, please let everybody know what your deal is and where they can find all your amazing work.
Hey, guys, thank you for having me back. Yeah, first discussion we had, it was awesome. I loved hanging out with you guys. And as we was talking a little bit pre-roll, we met through a mutual friend, Heidi. So shout out to Heidi Love. Thank you so much. That's the sister from the mother that I never met, but I'm thankful that she gave birth to us. We've done a lot of collaborations together, and we've introduced each other to a lot of friends and stuff. So it's been a beautiful friendship. I'm definitely thankful for her. But yeah, my name is Doc Brown from the Prometheus Lens podcast. All things conspiracy, fringe, ancient history, lost civilizations, all those cool fringy topics, Nephilim, giants, fallen angels, all those type things. But I try to filter them through a biblical lens. I just released a book called the Prometheus Lens. I had a mystic Mark from my family thinks I'm crazy. I was on his show one time. He was like, you filter it through a biblical lens, but you got a name like Prometheus Lens. Why not like Ezekiel's lens? I'm like, I've always been guilty of being a little esoteric.
Right? You got to keep it spicy that way too.
Yeah. But I just released my first book called The Epic of Esau, the Birthright, and Seed War. But anywhere you can consume content, you can find my stuff. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere, any of those fine establishments, you can find me.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. And of course, your links will be in the bottom of the show notes. So yeah, the book. That's what we wanted to get you on for today. I guess, however, I understand you want to sell the book, so you can't, tell us the whole thing. But I guess as much as you'd like to get into, I guess start wherever you like. First off, actually, I would like to start off with what made you even write it, sir?
Yeah, honestly, we kind of talked about it jokingly last time. I was just a hellion, for lack of a better term, for 90% of my life. I was the embodiment of the prodigal son. Any of the people that I grew up with, if I lost contact with them and you told them now that, yeah, Justin is doing a podcast and he's reading all kinds of books and giving discussions and lectures at conferences and writing books and stuff, they're gonna be like, no, you ain't talking about the same dude. that Justin's in prison or probably dead.
Right.
So yeah, writing a book was definitely not something that I ever thought that I would do. But just it started as a catty joke, man. It was just I had Trey Smith from God in a Nutshell on one of my shows, and he was honestly one of those guys that, quote unquote, red pilled me. And so it was really cool having him on the show and just actually talking with him. And he made a comment. He was like, yeah, you guys are from East Tennessee. That's Bigfoot country. Next time that I'm out that way, maybe I'll give you guys a shout and we'll go Bigfoot hunting, and we'll film it, do a little documentary. And just out of nowhere, Genesis 25:25 popped into my head. And that's a story that I'd read many, many times. And I don't know, it just hit me differently that day. And I said, well, Trey, I said, what about Esau? Genesis 25:25. Do you think Esau was maybe one of the first Bigfoot documented? And he kind of chuckled. You know, for those that's not familiar, Genesis 25:25 says, the first one came out red, covered in hair from head to toe, like a hairy cloak. And he kind of chuckled. He's like, I don't know. You might be onto something there, Justin. He was definitely a hairy dude, that's for sure. And he just kind of chuckled, and we laughed it off. And that's kind of all it was, honestly. But it's just, you know, the ancient Greeks called it the muse. Christians call it the Holy Spirit. Some people just calls it the universe, you know, I mean, whatever you want to call it. But all these string of events kept happening and lead me down this path on this trail of Esau. It was like a week later, I had Gary Wayne on the show, and we were going through the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I knew the overall story, but I hadn't actually read the thing in full. So I was reading it, and I bump into Enkidu. And here's this hairy guy covered in hair from head to toe. Sounds a lot like Esau. So here's this other Sasquatch-sounding guy. And I'm like, dude, here's another one of these hairy dudes.
Was Enkidu the guy who like had a robot with him or something like that too?
Now, Enkidu was Gilgamesh's equal in the story. He was this wild man of the field that was created as his equal. And they end up battling, but they become best friends, and they go on this, you know, epic journey together. And then they take out this monster of the field called Humbaba, and but it's basically kind of like some people summarize it as man versus nature, you know, the yin and yang kind of thing. But and then it's maybe a week later, honestly, maybe two, doing another show, and I mean, this guy's talking about the book of Jasher, and in there we discover Nimrod, and that Nimrod, he was the mighty hunter, and he builds up jealousy and envy against Esau, who his claim to fame was also the mighty hunter. And it sounds like a mirrored image of the Epic of Gilgamesh. And that he goes out and hunts this hairy beast of a man, and they do battle. And so I just kept bumping into these hairy men, into this guy Esau over and over. So I was like, man, I have to go digging a little bit. And so I did. I just started digging and going through all these extra biblical books and ancient legends and lores. I discovered Louis Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews. And honestly, I found just this guy's story that has just been busted up and broken into pieces, scattered throughout all these ancient texts and scrolls. And I pieced together a narrative, honestly, guys, that weaves in and out perfectly and seamlessly and complements the biblical narrative perfectly, and I think fills in all the gaps of this really enigmatic character of the Bible that we call Esau. And I done the artwork and everything, but on the front of it, it's just got this this Sasquatch-looking guy walking away from the back with a bow on his back because he's the mighty hunter. And then there's the table with the famous red bowl of stew that he's walking away from, where he trades his birthright.
That's nice. And you did the artwork yourself, you said, huh?
Yeah. I wrote it, I edited it, did the artwork. It's 100% me.
That's awesome, man. Good for you.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Jin and JJ, only because like I knew this stuff maybe back in 2010 when I first got into conspiracy theorists. Actually, this Sumerian and Gilgamesh and all that stuff was like very big for me. And then like, honestly, I'm just gonna keep it real. I don't remember that stuff that much, but I was just wondering, did you guys like remember the Gilgamesh stuff? And I just remember from looking at those stories in the past, there was a lot of them that I was like, these are quite obvious, like redone in the Bible, in my opinion. So
I think Zachariah Stitching and Sumerian stuff is like a junior high of conspiracy culture, right? Once you get past the JFK stuff, you know what I mean? You start looking into the lost civilizations and you get into all that Rockefeller finance, Zachariah Stitching research. You know, his office was next door to Jordan Maxwell. These characters, I find, are often pushing the same narratives, right? Yeah. Jehovah's Witness headquarters employee, Jordan Maxwell. You know what I mean? So these are the guys I think that a lot of push a lot of these ancient Sumerian tales, but there are some interest, even in their false limited hangout narratives, like there is some interesting aspects you can pick up from their work. But these ideas of Sumeria were I believe Abraham comes from, right? Even in the biblical lineage, right? Correct me if I'm wrong there, Doc, but Abraham, who's the Abrahamic religions, right? He comes from Ur in the ancient Sumer civilization.
Yep. Yeah, he's from the land of Haran.
Oh, is that spelled Huron? Is like the in there still? That'd be interesting. It still has the in there.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing that always interested me was the fact that there are these historical, examples of artifacts and languages and whatnot from this era. Libraries of things that have been found over in modern day Iraq, like the Babylonian stuff.
Yeah, Ashurbanipal.
Yeah, okay, because that came right after Sumer, right? It was Sumer, then Babylon, right? Is that the sequence of historical civilizations? So then we see the same stuff within the Bible, right? We see these characters as described in the Bible that are the same characters described within this historical tale. We just call them different names oftentimes, but Abraham being the bridging gap between those, it seems.
Yeah, and a lot of the stories and stuff, when you go to the extra biblical books, they intertwine. So like when you go with the book of Jasher, it has Nimrod being the king over the land of Haran, that Terah, which was Abraham's father, was the head idol maker for. And it was Nimrod that threw them in the fire, and that when God called out Abraham, that was he was the king over the land that they went out from. So there's lots of interweaving and stuff in the narratives of those stories and stuff.
Jen.
Yes. So for me, I definitely always have been a Central Asianist because this just makes sense to obviously my religious background and my cultural background. I've always been interested in Central Asia. I've always been interested in Buddhist studies and what that means, and because they narrate it as how Christians narrate their story being Near East. The Central Asian religions narrate their story as being central pillar, but also central to the world island, which would be in Iraq or Kazakhstan or any of those, one of those nebulous Central Asian countries. So for me, I'm like you, Nick, I'm not that familiar with that canon, but from my listening to Robbie on this show discuss the Tower of Nimrod and all of that work, and I'm friendly with another independent researcher named Patrick Moise, who's been on my show, and he is also interested in the same kind of narrative of the biblical genealogies and who became what people. So I think that it's a running theme through the way I think about the world, but I'm not necessarily versed in the information that Doc Brown is.
Yes, gotcha. Well, neither am I. Thank you. Doc, one thing I did want to ask you, or maybe, I don't know if JJ or Jim would know. You would probably know better. And I'm not trying to get off of what you were talking about. It's just something that popped into my head. Is it Moses and somebody else? It might have been Esau. Aren't they both kind of born with a lot of hair? Or maybe Moses had the glowing eyes or something. Wasn't there something weird about both the way they came out? Or wasn't there somebody else that might have been associated with having hair too? I could be wrong, which is why I'm asking.
Well, there are some other wild men or hairy men in the biblical text, but I think what you're talking about is in the book of Enoch. It mentions that when Noah was born, that he had a glowing aura about him, and that they were asking, basically his father wanted to know, he seeked his grandfather, Methuselah, wanted to know if he was of the angels. Wanted to, make sure his wife wasn't fooling around with the angels because he was so different. Yeah,
this could happen.
I'll jump in really quick for this. Is that there is an interpretation of this story that he was in fact born on call. So like with the veil over his face, the placental veil. And then that, because that still means something in like esoteric Judaism, esoteric circles now. So I think that that's kind of interesting. It's like, yes, you can say he was glowing and like the baby would be illuminant in a way if he's coming out with like a kind of reddish, fleshy veil over his face. I mean, maybe it's a metaphor.
You know what's interesting is there has been an occultist that we followed, not to get off the topic really, but they have even showed like hosts supposing to, like occultists have mentioned hosts supposing to be the placenta at times. Believe it or not, I've come across that, which is interesting. Like not the cakes of light technically, but something like that. You know what I'm saying? When they make their own and it's not like the same host from a Catholic church, but I have heard that it could represent the placenta. So I'm bringing that up because obviously if that's the case, it must be used in occult terms for something. And I don't even think they're technically meaning the real placenta. I think they're saying something else there. Just wanted to throw that in. Thanks. All right, go ahead, Doc.
But one of the things that just kind of got me started was just reading it and just letting the text say what it says. Because one of the things that kind of got me in the the quote unquote conspiracy realm or the fringy side of the Bible was just how the supernatural was just whitewashed out of the text and trying to restore the supernatural worldview and the original lens of the people of that time. Because with our modern viewpoint, we have totally just whitewashed this text and we've lost the original interpretation of it. And to get the original contents, and context and meaning of this text, we have to restore that vision and get that mindset back. So I just try to read the text and let it say what it says. And when I read that, he come out red, covered in hair from head to toe like a hairy cloak. So he come out with red hair all over his body like a hairy cloak's what it says. So my first thought was, this is a little Sasquatch, man, And if we took that in our modern vernacular, if we seen someone covered in red hair from head to toe out in the woods without hesitation, we would say we seen a Sasquatch or we seen a Bigfoot.
That or at least a ginger.
Yeah.
No offense to ginger.
So another thing about Esau that's kind of he's known for and he's famous for is the trading of his birthright. And that's another thing that when I was a kid growing up in church that just never sit right with me or never made sense to me. And in that story, you get the birth of Esau, and then it just kind of fast forwards to when he's an adult. And you hear that he's this mighty hunter of the field. And then in Genesis, it just says one day he comes in from the field exhausted. And that his brother, Jacob, the younger brother, is preparing some red lentil stew, and that he asks his brother for some of this red stew. And his brother says, yeah, you can have some of this red stew, but trade me your birthright. And in the context of this, the eldest son gets the birthright, gets the inheritance. You're the one that's going to inherit the keys to the kingdom, the money, all the land, the titles, everything is going to be yours. So like in modern context, it's like your father's Donald Trump, all the real estate, the millions of dollars, the business, everything is going to be yours. And so Esau just says, sure, what use is a birthright to me when I'm dead? Take it.
It's better be some good stew.
Yeah. And so Jacob just says, no, promise me that you will do this thing. And he says, yes, I promise. And he eats the red stew and he walks away. And I'm like, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And pastors would just say, oh, well, he was a very carnal man. He was ruled by his stomach. He just thought about, he was ruled by his fleshly desires in his stomach, and he cared nothing for his birthright. That's what that story was trying to convey there. And once I started reading some of these extra biblical texts, it tied up just a lot of loose ends. And I had mentioned it earlier, but the book of Jasher was one of those.
Yeah, you did.
And when I was reading through there, I get introduced to Nimrod, and immediately that was eye-catching for me. And it says that, Nimrod was this mighty hunter, and Esau was also known as the mighty hunter. So it's kind of like the Highlander. There can only be one, baby. And so these two mighty hunters had to clash to see who the real mighty hunter was. And it said in the book of Jasher that jealousy and hatred and envy had built up in the heart of Nimrod all of his days against Esau. And that him and two of his Gibborim, which in Hebrew means mighty, and that's the same word used in Genesis 6 and throughout the Old Testament to describe the Nephilim giants, goes out to hunt this hairy quote-unquote man. And they go out and they go try to hunt this man, but it says Esau is out in the wilderness and that he sees them and he hides himself. And it says that Esau springs basically a trap, and that he jumps out and takes his sword and he cuts off Nimrod's head. And then he battles the other two Gibborim to the death and kills them. Well, there's another hunting party that they separated themselves from, but this hunting party hears all the commotion and comes running. But it says before Esau leaves, it says that he takes the time to remove Nimrod's garments. And it gives this little cliff note, and it says that he removes the garments to which Nimrod was able to prevail over all the nations and lands. And then it says that Esau takes the garments and runs back to his house, and he hides the garments, and then goes into his brother Jacob's tent. And then there's where it picks up, where the book of Genesis starts. And I mean, it dovetails perfectly into the book of Genesis. And so, yeah, I mean, he come in from the field exhausted, all right. He just killed the king, Nimrod, and battled two giants. He probably sustained some life-threatening injuries, and probably answers the question, to why he made that comment that he made. What use is a birthright to me when I'm dead? Take it. He was probably bleeding out. Oh. And so this was like a desperation trade. He was probably, on the run. He just killed the king and was bleeding out. And this soup was probably like an allegorical type thing of
blood transfusion.
Hide me, sustain me, bandage me up. What use is a birthright to me when I'm dead? Take it. And that's why Jacob was like, no, promise me you'll do this thing. And to me, that made a lot more sense than just, he was just hungry. Because, he was the mighty hunter.
I was just hungry. Yeah,
he wasn't starving.
Go kill a squirrel. And I don't know if they had squirrels back then.
Yeah. And then my number one thing after that was, after reading that, I was like, well, hold up. What's so special about those garments that Nimrod was able to prevail over all the lands? So I kept reading through Jasher, and it tells you these garments were the birthright. And it says in there that these were the supernatural garments from the Garden of God that were given to Adam as his covering. And it said that that basically at the Garden of Eden, when Nakash, the serpent, tried to deceive Adam and Eve, he was cast down. That he was once the high priest of all creation. He was like the king and priest of creation, and he was demoted, and dominion and priesthood was given to humanity. And when you go to Ezekiel 28, talking about Satan there, it says, every precious stone was your covering. You are perfect the day you were created. And it says beryl, onyx, topaz, jasper, onyx. It names all these different stones. The Masoretic text lists 9 stones, but the Septuagint lists 12. And if you go through there and read that, that's a perfect description of the priestly ephod that the Jewish priests wore entering the tabernacle. And then on down it even says, you profaned your sanctuaries. So it's painting Satan in a priestly role, and it even says he has a sanctuary. And the book of Jasher traces these garments being given to Adam and to Enoch, to Methuselah, to Noah, and it says that Noah has these garments going through the flood. And it says that in Ham's going out, that Ham stole the garments and give them to Cush, and that Cush hid them, and that Nimrod was the child of Cush's old age, whom he loved exceedingly, and that when Nimrod, at the coming of age, when he turned 20 years old, he gave the garments to Nimrod, and that when Nimrod put on the garments, he became a Gibborim. In the book of Genesis, a lot of people are fascinated because it says that Nimrod wasn't born a Gibborim. It says that he becomes a Gibborim. And a lot of people theorize, that he was, he become a giant. Well, how did he do that? Was it, occult sex magic? Was it, sacrificial rites? And they have all these different theories to how he became a Nephilim. Well, the book of Jasher attributes it to these supernatural garments. And I discovered Louis Ginsburg. He wrote a 7-book series called the Legends of the Jews, and it talks about these garments too. And it goes into great detail, and it says that these were the skins of the Nakash, the serpent, and it said that the wearer of these garments, that even the beasts of the field would bow down to the wearer of these garments. So that's what Nimrod was wearing when Esau kills him and he steals them from him. And that's what he hides in his house before he goes and trades the birthright for the bowl of stew.
One garment to rule them all?
Yes.
It's like the Lord of the Rings type of characteristic to these garments, right?
And that's what he was drawing off of, I believe. And and you even see that in that movie, Noah, 2014, because in
Russell
that
Crowe,
story,
huh?
Yeah, whoever wrote that storyline was really looking deep into Jewish mysticism and Louis Ginsburg Legends of the Jews and reading these extra biblical books. Because it wasn't until after I read all these lost books and these legends and stuff that I looked back at that movie and I seen these garments. Because you remember in that film, it starts off and Adam and Eve's in the garden and they're light beings and they're holding hands, right? And then it shows this serpent slither up and it opens its mouth and it sheds its skin and it leaves that snake skin and it's glowing and it's golden, and then Adam walks over and picks it up. And then later in the film you see King Og with it and he wears it around his arm and it's kind of like a crown. That's his symbol of kingship and authority. And then in the film he sneaks onto the boat, and Ham, just like I was saying, he gets obsessed with it. And like in the film, you catch him staring at this thing, kind of like Gollum in The Ring.
Sure.
He just stares at it. He's obsessed with it. And at one point, he even tries to steal it from Og. And Og catches him and he grabs him by the throat. And he was like, "This is for a man. You're not a man yet." And like throws him down. And then in that film, when Noah finally discovers him in the bow of the ship, they get in this fight, and Ham has to decide, whose side he's going to pick. And he ends up just siding with his father, and he stabs Og in the back.
And then Og turns around, he's bleeding out of his mouth, and he looks at Ham and he says, "Now you're a man." And he hands him that serpent skin, the garments, what that symbolized. And in that film, at the very end of it, if you remember, Noah's standing there, and Ham has been kicked out of the family, and Noah is taking that snake skin and he's wrapping it around his arm. And he says, "This is the birthright given to Adam. And he was told to be fruitful and multiply. And now I pass this birthright to you." And he touches the foreheads of those newborn babies, and that serpent skin glows and lights up as he's touching the heads of those babies. So you even see that those supernatural garments in that film.
I never heard of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of deep esoteric stuff is built in the films. I know the films you're talking about in the scenes, but I never would have, I never had these details behind why they were in there. That sounds very interesting.
For sure.
Yeah, I didn't either till I read this stuff and I looked back on it.
There was a lot of stuff you've mentioned. Well, one thing I did want to ask you, the other books that you're looking into, were any of them like considered Gnostic books or no?
No.
Gnostic
Well,
texts.
these were like Louis Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews. He went through and just compiled all like their ancient legends and lore.
Oh no, like I know all right, the Book of Joshua, I know that one's not, but like the Book of, I think, Thomas, and like the Book of Mary Magdalene, those are considered Gnostic texts. I wasn't sure if you used anything like that. Okay.
No, I didn't go into any of that stuff.
Okay, no,
I went
just
into
wondering.
I went into like the Midrash and the Targums, some of Rashi's from like medieval writings and stuff like that. But like the Gnostic stuff, I didn't really go into.
Okay, I was just, when you started mentioning like other like unused books, I was just wondering if any of those.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, now I don't know exactly where it's coming from because again, I don't know the Bible that well, and I don't know. But stuff. There was a lot of things that you were mentioning, and I guess I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it does remind me a lot. I hate to say it, of stuff that I've witnessed in the OTO. Not so much things being said, but I think like the things being done or the imagery around. Like, I mean, I still think there's a reason we have a tent in the Minerval initiation. We have a fucking tent almost practically in the middle of the room that we never mention or say anything about. And then like even in like the Gnostic Mass, it is focused that this guy's being clothed and covered as he comes out of, starts off the Mass. There was a lot of things that you were talking about. Yeah, well, look, I mean, that isn't
the holiest of holies. That was the the tabernacle and the priestly garment, the ephod. And that's kind of what Satan does historically, is he kind of perverts that stuff. And that's kind of what I talk about in the book, because there was a whole narrative and seed war that I discovered. Because when I found that and I found those garments, I was like, well, that's just wild. And then I discovered too, along with that, with Ham, like, I talked about the bowl of soup, how that just didn't make sense to me. And then I found, that other story that tied in that just made sense. Well, even with Noah, him, getting drunk and passing out naked, and his son Ham seeing his nakedness and him cursing him and cursing his firstborn son. That was another thing that just didn't make any sense to me. But when you go into Leviticus 18, that makes perfect sense, because in there it says to uncover thy father's nakedness is to sleep with thy father's wife. So that's what happened there. It wasn't that Noah got drunk and his son seen him naked. No. In that story, Ham slept with his mother. It was an incestuous act, and that was an act of rebellion in the ancient world. It's how the young son tried to overthrow the father and take over the household, because you see it repeatedly in the Bible. Absalom, when he tried to overthrow David, he run David out of the kingdom, and the first thing he done is he pitched a tent on David's house, and he went into all of David's concubines in the sight of all of Israel. And then Reuben, he slept with his father's concubines, as an act of rebellion to try to take over the household.
Jeez.
So Ham,
Yeah, it seems to be the move in these bloodlines, right? I mean, you got the same
Yeah.
thing with Moses and Akhenaten situations, right? Whether or not Moses is Akhenaten or whether or not Moses was Akhenaten's brother, Akhenaten's sister, wife. You know, he's got a very Emmanuel Macron situation popping off in Egypt.
Yeah, well, Macron.
He's got a husband, wife, father.
That is some good way to put it. Wow, it's like some
that's
Egyptian
why you got
shit
the
right
blue
there.
bloods, how they marry into each other and try to keep the bloodlines pure, and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And it makes sense when you look at it in that context, because Canaan was the firstborn son of Ham. And when you read the story, Canaan wasn't even born yet. So it doesn't make sense. Why would Noah, recover from his drunkenness and then figure out what happened and say, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant to thy brothers, Shem and Japheth, you shall be." Canaan wasn't even born yet. And then secondly, Shem and Japheth wouldn't be his brothers unless, oh shit, they had the same mother. Because Canaan was the result of Ham sleeping with his mother, and she got pregnant with Canaan.
There you go.
And that's why Canaan was a cursed lineage, because he was an incest baby. And that's why Abraham and all those of God's people throughout the Bible were commanded not to take wives from the Canaanites, because that's why they were a cursed lineage, because they were created from incest. And that so you have this whole supernatural type of like seed war thing going on. And when you go, like I was talking about Louis Ginsburg, The Legends of the Jews, where it talks about Esau, they even said in there that he was born, not only was he born, looking like this hairy Sasquatch guy, it says it in there that Jacob had a guardian angel, but his guardian angel was Gabriel. And it said that Esau had a guardian angel, but his guardian angel was Samael. Samael was the name of Satan before the fall. And it said that Esau was also born with a serpent's marking or branding. So they were pointing to Esau being a serpent seed. And if you look at in Genesis, the birth of Esau, not only did he come out covered in hair from head to toe, looking just like a fertility god, all these fertility gods, these wild men like Pan and everything else. In Genesis 3:15, at the curse, it says in there that he was going to put enmity between her seed and the serpent's seed, right? He said one would bruise one's head and the other would bruise one's heel. So when Rebekah gets pregnant, the angel of the Lord comes to Rebekah and says, 2 nations, 2 peoples are in your womb, and they are at enmity with each other. One will be stronger than the other. He says, but the younger will rule over the older. So that's backwards from the culture. So the angel is warning her, make sure that the younger rules over the older. But the older is going to be stronger than the younger.
You see, it's weird. That even sounds like, not to interrupt, this is like the Aeon of Horus, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and then when they're born, the writer gives all these extra details, because not only does Esau come out covered in hair from head to toe and all this stuff, it's like Satan, and this is me postulating here, it's like he reached in the womb and turned them around. And that's why the angel of the Lord had to come and warn her. Make sure that the youngest rules over the older, because he knew, this is me, speculating here. It's like he knew he was going to flip them. Because when they're born, it's almost like Esau's foot is pushing on Jacob's head, bruising the head. And it says in there that Jacob's hand is grasping the heel of Esau, bruising the heel. It says that in Genesis, that when they're born, Esau comes out first, red, covered in hair from head to toe, and that Jacob is clutching the heel of Esau. It is a snapshot, a Polaroid picture of the curse of Genesis 3:15. It's the seed war.
It was really weird. Again, it's probably because I'm stoned. I just get like these random thoughts. But like, even in David Bowie's Black Star, near the end of the song, he says, "We were born upside down. We were born the wrong way round." And he even influences like that returning. I think it's how you said, where he's twisted during birth.
Mm.
I don't know. I thought of the same thing when you said that.
Yeah, and so when you go to the garden, if you go to their legends and stuff, his garment was taken from him and given to humanity. And if he does have a seed, where it says she has a seed, he has a seed, they're going to be at enmity with one another. If Esau was his seed, it makes perfect sense that they're fighting over this authority position and these garments. So it's kind of tied into this storyline here, the battling of these garments. And it also gives motivation, because I said it in the book. If this was his authority position, something he wore with pride and pomp, and this was basically his crown, his kingship and authority thing, and it was taken from him and given to his quote unquote younger brother. If you look at it in the family aspect, that alone would make Satan hate you.
Do you ever think it's possible? I don't know. This is a question going out there only because the shit's stuck in my head and I'll just talk about it. Do you ever wonder if some of these stories might actually be going back to physiology or anything, like the brain and the eyes and stuff?
No, I never thought about it.
No, I have with this story, just in a certain extent. No, but it just would be too much to explain. I figured I'd ask. Yeah. All right.
No, sorry, Justin. Sorry, Nick. But I just want to jump in here and say that Nick said something really interesting, because if the eyes are the flaming eyes, the eye is the perceiver, the watcher of the world, you could say. So Doc Brown was talking about the Gibberim. Well, Nick, as you know, because we talk about Kabbalah pretty much every time I come on, is that Gibberim can also refer to that process of the sage or the saint moving through the fire of Geburah. That's even obviously related. So he becomes the hero through the fires of transmutation. But it's not
purification of the soul in that sense too, purified by fire.
Yes, exactly. But in the Jewish idea, he doesn't stay at Geburah. So that's more of a Western magician idea, that the terminus is Geburah. But in the Jewish idea, he actually passes from Hesed, so Jupiter, or the mercy of God, into the strength of God. So also referencing Samael, because Samael can also be understood as the one of the angels that is at Geburah. So he has to pass through the water and the fire, and then he comes out at Tiferet, or the sun. So there's an implicit balance, and even with the numerology of some of the verses that Justin was talking about, a lot of them have 10. They'll be equivalent to 10, and so you'll see this as a sort of a subtle twilight language, a signal that it's really talking about the middle pillar. But it might explain it through the extremities or the polarities. Anyways, it's just a thought I had.
Yeah, no. I probably should have brought up a lot of this stuff as it was going on. I wanted to keep it his show and not mine. So. But there was a lot of stuff that was coming up that just to me makes me think about a lot of the brain and the eyeballs. Even a lot of stuff with the Nephilim and the Elohim, sometimes I do question if that's the formation of the brain, the X and Y chromosomes, because it's almost the same story if you look at what's going on. And then your eyeballs are born, it's not to get into it. And, then all the coverings and stuff, everything's deeply layered with the eyeballs and the brain. You do have layers around them. I mean, it's even one of the logos that I have a spider on there. People probably have no idea why. It's for the arachnoid layer that surrounds your brain. That's why I have it there. It references back to a spider. But
I'm a firm believer everything's multi-layered.
Yeah,
it's you have alchemical, you have literal, you have physiology. It's there's things that have multi-layers of truth, man.
Yeah, no, but just some reason, like
Multi-layers.
this story that you covered, just like it was just hitting on so many things, and I was like, fuck. That's why I was like sitting here, like, geez. I was like really.
Oh, it is.
I was going through a lot of stuff in my head. I was like, that sounds like something like. Have you either seen in the
it
other
is.
occult stuff or in the OTO? I was like, fuck.
And one thing I found that was really cool too is like the bloodlines, because you have all this stuff going on, and once when he trades that birthright, it's like he tells his brother whatever he wants to hear just because he wants to survive. You know, it's like, oh, whatever, I'll tell you whatever you want to hear, Daddy. It's just I want to live. And so after he does that, it's like later on when his father's dying, he goes to give him the blessing. And this is kind of like, you know, I can verbally tell you, yeah, I'll give you my 2010 Challenger when I die, son. But if we don't go to the lawyer's office and fill out the paperwork, it's not official, you know. So when the father gives you the blessing at the deathbed, that's the signing of the documents, it's official. So his father, when he's on his deathbed, he calls Esau, and he says, son, you know, my life's fading. I want to taste your game one last time. Go on a hunt, prepare for me a delicious meal, and I will give you your blessing. So if he, you know, planned on honoring his agreement that he made with his brother, that would have been a perfect time for him to be like, Dad, I traded the birthright to my younger brother. But he didn't do that. He was like, okay, yeah, I'll be right back. And it says that Isaac's vision was fading. He was going blind in his older age. So Esau leaves to go on this hunt. Well, Rebecca was hiding by the tent and overhears this, and she runs and gets Jacob. And here's where you get the deception in the Bible. And Rebecca tells Jacob, go get a young goat from the field and kill it. I'll prepare a delicious meal for your father, and you go in and pretend to be your brother and steal the blessing. And he says, no, mother. He says, I'm a smooth man. If my father knows I'm playing a trick, a curse will fall upon me instead of a blessing. And she says, well, if a curse falls, let it fall upon my head. Just do as I say. So a lot of people that want to try to say, oh, well, Esau's hairiness is hyperbole or it's poetic language, you know, well, how do you explain that? Because he says, no, I'm a smooth man. And when he goes and kills the goat, they take the goat's fur and they wrap it around him like a blanket. And then the garments are in that story too, because a lot of people miss it. Before he goes in, they wrap him in this blanket, this goat's fur. And it says that Rebekah goes to Esau's tent and takes his special garment and places it upon Jacob before he enters the tent. And that when he walks into the tent, Isaac reaches out and feels of the goat's fur and says, I hear my son Jacob, but I feel my son Esau. But then he makes this remark. He says, but you smell of the field. So I know you are my son Esau. And so I kind of make like this little, you know, joke, kind of like a half-hearted joke, but it's like you kind of hear about these phantom smells, you know, with the Bigfoot encounters, and how I'm kind of talking about how Esau, you know, might be a Bigfoot. But so they deceive him, and he gives the blessing, and he leaves. Well, Esau comes back and says, here, Father, arise, eat your meal and give me my blessing. He's like, I already give you your blessing. He's like, no, you didn't, Father. And they realized, you know, the trick was in. And according to Louis Ginsburg in his The Legends of the Jews, it's in the Bible it just says that he gets so mad that he says he's going to kill his brother. And Rebecca sends him to the land of Haran and says, just hide till your brother's wrath subsides. He's threatened to kill you. But Louis Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews gives a little more detail. It says that Esau says, I will slay my brother, not with sword nor bow. I will bite his neck and drain him of his blood, and I will bite him until he is dead. So it's kind of got like this vampiristic feel to it. But at this point, it's like Esau goes into full rebellion. and he takes 3 wives, and 2 of the wives are Canaanite wives, and then they're commanded not to do. And we kind of talked about that earlier. But thanks to people like Gary Wayne that done such a good job tracing the genealogies, we know that 2 of those wives were Horites and Hivites, and they were known Nephilim giant tribes. And the book of Genesis says one of them was this guy named Seir, and he reigned from this land called Mount Seir. And when you go into the etymology in Hebrew, that means hairy. So here you have this hairy, quote-unquote, Sasquatch-sounding guy, Esau, that marries into Nephilim giant tribes with their names meaning hairy. You got a pretty high likelihood of throwing some really strange pups anyway. And from this union is birthed the Amalekite race. And once again, the etymology of that name in Hebrew means the blood lickers.
Yeah.
So it's got like even a vampiristic feel to that also. And
sounds like some cannibals, right?
Yes, exactly. And the medieval Rabbi Rashi, in his writings, he talks about that they were known sorcerers and that they were shapeshifters. And that's why it said, kill every man, woman, and child when they were coming out of the wilderness wanderings, because they were known shapeshifters, and that they would shift into animal forms to evade capture. And that's why they told them to do that.
Well, a lot of giant cannibal stories throughout time, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. It's pretty wild. Yeah. And you get echoes of it, I believe, like when you go to, like you can see like their migrations. Because Sardinia, like during the winter solstice, they have this archaic tradition. And when you ask them, hell, they don't even remember where it comes from. But they have like this thing they call the Mathones. And the men dress up and they cover themselves in black goat's fur and black wooden masks, and they put golden or copper bells on their backs, and they dance through the streets, and they abduct women and children that are coming of age. They light these huge bonfires, and to prove their vigor or bravery, they have to pass through the fire. And then you have Krampus, up there in Europe, and all these other wild man stories and traditions. I think all that stuff is echoing from these Nephilim giant tribes and union of these Amalekite, these hairy, quote-unquote, people.
What was the example of the one before Krampus you were talking where they were raiding folks and raping and pillaging things? What was this one?
Like in Sardinia, the Mathones during
Sardinia?
The winter solstice, they would dress up and cover themselves in black goat's fur and dance to the streets.
You said
the moment you said that, I thought of the festivals of Krampus. I mean, these are the same festivals you're talking. We're just different cultures and different times, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
You mentioned copper bells. I don't know much about that thing, but when you've looked into it, does it specify specifically like it's always like copper bells or something that's supposed to be?
Yeah, they put hundreds of copper bells on their backs.
Jen, you think that's for a specific reason, the copper?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's clearly very affiliated with Venus, with Netzach, because it also has a greening quality, right? Copper does. So, and it also
it'll turn green when it's copper with God, what do they call that word? I forgot, but eventually it'll turn copper. I mean, copper will turn green because it looks like
shit. It oxidizes.
Oxidizes.
And interestingly, mercury, something you brought up pre-recording, mercury actually dissolves the greening process, the chrysopia. Yeah. So something interesting about that, because Hod and Netzach have that inherent kind of relationship. Mercury and Venus have like a constant energetic push and pull.
Yeah. You know what it is too is that like even I can't remember exactly what episodes recently, but like it might have been the one with Pyramid Power with I forgot his name. Oops. Or maybe another episode. We were talking about like you see like a lot of these alchemists or like these old like drawings of these people and like these old occultists and like they're wearing like an aluminum or a copper hat. And people like aren't thinking much about it. It's like, oh, it's just some weird thing. And like we had somebody like kind of on that was like, if you kind of understand like science and some basic shit, actually. With copper and a few wires, you can actually start doing some weird shit. You start cloud busting. But, how do you know, what I'm getting at is I do think some of these metals sometimes back in the day, believe it or not, I think they're actually hip to occult science. And that's why they actually chose certain metals to wear, as jewelry or symbolism. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Nephilim giants were obsessed with copper, too. Like the copper trade. There was a lot of people theorized that the giants during the, what they call it, the Great Diaspora, when they were invading the Holy Land, the ones that were smart jumped on their ships and took off. And they theorized, a lot of people, that a bunch of them went to North America. And that's why you see over in Michigan all those copper mines that were mined. And they even have, I'm having a brain fart on the name, Phoenician-style ships carved into the rocks and stuff over there in Michigan that they found.
Really?
And I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of pounds that they have estimated that are missing from those mines. And the thing is about the Michigan copper is that it's traceable. It's the most pure copper in the world. It's like 95.8% pure. And because it's so pure, they can trace it. And they find that specific copper in Europe, in Asia, Africa, everywhere. And they know that so much is missing because these Phoenicians, these giants, were coming over and mining it and bringing it back and shipping it throughout the world. And a lot of people theorize these are the same people that were going into Michigan and from there hitting the rivers and going into the Ohio River Valley and building all these mounds and giant structures.
I was just going to say, I could imagine with rivers and the copper, that might actually really help trying to get certain effects with that land if you knew what you were doing. That's interesting.
So these are the folks that are buried at the bottom of these mounds, is what you're saying there, Doc?
Yeah,
the Adena mounds, the giant quote unquote giant human skeletons.
I think so.
Sure.
Sorry, guys. Something interesting that Nick said. If you have copper and water, and you're laying it in a specific pattern, this is something I've been thinking about. Is that if you were trying to build like the tree of life in a physical sort of way, the first thing that you would build is not the Sephira, because the Sephira is just negative space, but you would build the paths. So what would be a better conductive material than both water and copper? And then both of those things have a negative quality as well because they can conduct electricity. So I don't know. I think that's really interesting that you said that, Nick, because if that's what roads are.
Yeah. I've even thought about like the copper piping in your house. You're running. It's interesting. Yeah, but no, I was just wondering. I guarantee you that land is probably very useful for certain stuff. That is interesting to think about with Michigan. Never knew that gold, that copper you were saying is like that.
Yeah, if you do like the research on, there's Fritz Zimmerman.
I've heard of
He's done a lot of work on that.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah, I've heard of that guy. Interesting. Oh.
Yeah, it's no shortage of copper either, Nick. I mean, we're talking like Justin was saying. There's a large volume of copper. I mean, it was mined out here over. Well, I think they estimate around 2,500, or I'm sorry, 3,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's the same dates. That's the same dates these Adena mounds are built in these same areas. Is where the routes in and around this copper mining operations.
And they believe the water levels were a lot higher back then too. That they could have sailed straight in from like around like Boston or the New England area and went straight in to the Great Lakes area.
Oh, sure. You could still do that in 1364 when some Knights Templar fellows did that and made their way all the way over to Kensington, Minnesota, Alexandria, Minnesota.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes sense because I think we was talking about last time, even that hexagon hinge up there, Newark, the opening
Yep.
of that hinge lines up perfectly to Beltane on May 1st. And I mean, that
Yeah.
was the Baal, that was the Phoenician god. Why is that lined up to a Phoenician worship day? And then you go up to America's Stonehenge. You know, Harvard professor Barry Fell found those stones up there with all that Paleo-Phoenician script and deciphered it. And then it said, we the Phoenicians lay claim to Baal we dedicate. I mean, the Phoenicians got their imprint
Kind of right in your
all over
face
the
at that
place.
point, right?
Yeah.
That's weird.
All this pre-American history stuff is very interesting relative to these stories you're describing with Esau. So with this Haran location, that's Turkey, right, where the story began when in the Esau tales here.
Yeah,
modern day-
Haran up there, yeah.
Modern day Turkey near Sanlurfa, correct?
Mm-hmm.
This would later also be an integral place in a number of storylines that area, and most notably that was the location the Knights Templar sent their first crusade to for the first 30 years of the Crusades.
But yeah, I mean, it's the cradle of all civilization, and they knew that. Yeah, they knew.
Yeah, they were
those
very
places
interested in that
area.
before they were very interested in Jerusalem. That whatever was going on there, that was their main headquarters for, like I said, 30 years.
Mm. Yeah. And interesting too was just touching back to what I was talking about there with the Amalekites. When you go back to Exodus, when God's people was in the wilderness wanderings, these Amalekites, these hairy, quote unquote men that was the product of Nephilim giants and Esau interbreeding. Like I said, Rashi had done said that they were sorcerers, known sorcerers. And according to the biblical text, these were the first people that attacked God's people in their wilderness wanderings. And the book of Isaiah talks about hairy satyrs. It talks about it, when you go into the Septuagint, it says the wild men will dance in the desolate cities and in the wilderness. Huh? Yeah. And I think it's kind of referencing these people.
Yeah. It's the same concept you find in Pan, right? The hairy wild men dancing in the wilderness, right?
Exactly. And you don't get, laws, rules, and regulations if people are not breaking these said laws, rules, and regulations, And during these wilderness wanderings, that's when they get all their do not do this, do not do that. So if you look at them, what are those? It says, do not pass your children through the fires of Molech. Do not drink the blood. The life is in the blood. It says, no longer will you sacrifice to hairy goat demons. Do not seek necromancers and sorcerers. So you're getting all these laws and rules like this that are all associated with sorcerers. And we know the Amalekites were there because the Bible says that they were there. They were the first ones to attack God's people while they were in their wilderness wanderings. We know, according to Rashi in his writings, that these Amalekites were sorcerers. We know by their names that they were hairy-looking goat demon people. We know by their names that they were blood lickers.
Yep.
I think that God's people
Cannibals.
were having encounters with these people and seeing them do all these things, and we're trying to copy and imitate them. And that's why they started getting all these laws and rules and regulations. And when they finally do have a battle with these people, you have this weird supernatural encounter, because a lot of people kind of skim over this, but when they finally have this battle with these Amalekites, you have this strange story where it says that Moses has to take his supernatural rod, this same rod now that divided the Red Sea, that turned the Nile to blood, that brought frogs out and locusts, that he threw down. It turned into a serpent and devoured the Pharaoh's magicians' serpents. This was a very special supernatural rod. That he took this rod and stood on a mountain and had to hold it over his head. And it said that only when he held this rod over his head were they able to overcome the Amalekites. And it said that when his arms grew tired and that he would lower the rod, that the Amalekites started overcoming the Israelites. And that Moses, that Aaron and Joshua had to like help him hold his arms up until the battle was finished and completed. So I think there's like a whole supernatural sorcery, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Gandalf kind of thing going on there that we're not reading into. Like, so Moses was on one mountain, doing some like sorcery type warfare against the head sorcerer of the Amalekites on the other side of the valley. That we kind of have to read between the lines there.
Now, I like all these stories, especially when you're talking all these bloodlines, especially when you're talking Moses and the interactions of whatever Moses and Akhenaten have there, because all of these bloodlines today through these European royalty and whatnot also claim lineage all the way back and into this American kind of blue blood and royalty stuff over here. They all seem to profess lineage back to Akhenaten and or Moses there.
Yeah, what you said, JJ, really interesting, because my buddy Patrick, I'll shout him out again, is that he posits like this division between the descendants of Ham and so in his opinion, the descendants of Ham become like these, we'll call them black magicians. And then, like Justin is saying, you have like this other faction. He calls it the Shem faction. This also makes sense to something Nick brought up, like the Gnostic texts. It's like, what Gnostic texts are you reading? They narrate different heroes. They narrate the same Bible heroes, but maybe in a totally different way. Maybe the Bible hero will be like the evil guy in one story, or the hero in another story. So it really depends. Like, narrative really matters. But then I think what Justin said was really interesting. Like, you have Noah casting, I think he said Noah or Moses. Excuse me. So Moses casting spells. Moses is the first. He's really the first sorcerer that you encounter in the Bible if you're reading it in that way. At least in terms of like the grimoire tradition and what people thought of it.
Yeah. That is true. Moses is, and I think I've said it on the show previously too, though. But Moses is coming, I guess, depending on what type of ceremonial magic you're into, he's considered like the OG. Good point. Thank you, Jim. Doc, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Or JJ, did you have any other questions about or things to talk about with like the mounds or things that were mentioning before we wrap it up?
Well, you read my mind, sir. I do like the mound narratives of this, and this how you tied in this. These folks may be the giants there at the base of these Adena mounds, and again, the Knights Templar and their descendants very interested in specifically these Adena mounds. So, and again, the Knights Templar again very interested in the ancient area of their Haran, the city of Haran, the San Larfa. It's gone through a number of names over the years, currently known as San Larfa there. It's the area where ISIS has been blowing stuff up for the last decade, right? The border of Syria and Turkey. Blowing up all those old ancient holy sites. That's the same region we're talking here.
Yeah.
But the Templars were very much interested in it. It seems like this mound stuff may be the throughput narrative throughout these times in various places between the American mound stuff and the Templars' interest in both of these locations as well, back over there to the old mound country, because there's mounds over there as well.
Yeah, and I think this Harry Wildman is connected to it also, and just like we talked about earlier, truth is multi-layered.
For sure,
it's not a one size fits all solution on anything. A lot of people want to talk about Bigfoot being a Gigantopithecus, or it's a supernatural thing that can teleport in and out of portals, or it's an ancient remnant of something left over. I don't see how it can't be all of these things. And in this book, it's 15 chapters, and I dive down a lot of different rabbit holes. But as far as like the Bigfoot phenomena, I cover all those different things and kind of tie it all up with a pretty red bow the best that I can, because I talk about the Nephilim giants. And if you go with that narrative too, even it talks about the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim are cursed to roam earth as demons. So I postulate if that is the case, would they not want to choose a familiar form that they used to be in, these huge, hairy-looking men, and then that could very well answer why they are able to phase in and out of reality and come in like apparitions and mind speak and things like that. And as far as the UFO phenomenon that's sometimes associated with them, I pose the question, could that very well be fallen angel conveyance checking in on their aunts and nieces and nephews, and family members and things like that, possibly. And you still have to leave the door open. Could there be a remnant, an ancient remnant left over? Yeah, I mean, look at the panda. A lot of people look at the panda and forget this was an ancient legend. It was a myth like Bigfoot. For thousands of years, people talked about this white bear in the Asian mountains, and people said it was fake. It wasn't real. It was a legend. It was fake. It wasn't real. And it took them thousands of years before they finally found one. And a panda's not that smart. If a panda can avoid being seen or captured for thousands of years,
you
have something that has human intelligence and is a mighty hunter and knows the cave systems, I mean, it's not unreasonable to think that it can avoid being seen or captured.
What interesting thing, and
That's a good comparison. That's a good comparison.
I hate to speak for her, she's not here, but the funny thing is with the panda, I've had Lisa explain this to me before. She even said the whole thing with that animal to even breed, it is so ridiculous. And she says if you look at its makeup, she says you would almost actually think that motherfucker was genetically made and not natural. So you even have to, was a legend brought to life.
Yeah.
I don't know, but she has told me that about the panda, that it's if you start looking at it, it is a very interesting, weird thing that shouldn't probably exist.
Yeah, and super dumb.
Sorry to interrupt with that, but
no, I mean that's a good point. That's something that my buddy brought up to me, and I was like, that is a good point, because I mean, if you have a humanoid creature with human intelligence that knows the cave systems in and out, it could very easily avoid being captured. And look at bears.
Oh yeah.
People talk about bears. It's like, we know there's bears everywhere. And I've been in the woods. I've been an avid hunter for a majority of my life. I've never seen a dead bear in the woods. And people talk about, how come we've never seen a dead Bigfoot, or we've never seen a body? Well, I've been a hunter most of my life. I've never seen a dead bear.
Still a live bear, but you're right. I've never seen a dead bear.
That is a really good point.
Shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you even look at certain animals, my opinion, I even think in my lifetime, unless I just wasn't paying attention that much, but I even feel like animals nowadays, just from looking at social media, it seems like they're almost getting a little bit more with it. Really almost like interacting with humans in weird ways. So it's like, after a certain amount of time, I mean, even if could something start to just kind of be aware and a little bit more secretive? Just after 50
they have
years.
to.
Yeah, no,
as the concrete jungle expands.
Yeah. That's interesting. Is there anything else you wanted to cover or talk about? Any of you guys got questions for this man over here?
What do the Catholics think of Esau? Why did they get rid of him out of their? Why was it a lost?
That's a good question.
A lost, scripture from the Vatican canon, right?
There's probably too much in there.
Honestly, that's a rabbit hole that it's pretty cool. If I can find it, I'll show you this picture.
All right.
I think that Esau and Cain is in the Sistine Chapel.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah, because obviously they've gone through various iterations over time of what is the Vatican and their theology, but and the power structure, but
because Esau's not the only hairy wild man.
Yeah.
a lot of extra biblical books and legends say that Cain's marking was that he was covered in hair, and that's why he was scared to death of being killed, because he looked like a wild animal, and that he was given a horn, one horn. And that Lamech, when he said, if Cain was cursed times 7, I'll be cursed 70 times 7 in the book of Genesis. Well, there's in the Midrash, the Jewish legends say that Lamech was going blind in his older age, and that his son would help him go hunting, and that his son thought he seen a wild animal and guided his bow and told him to shoot, and he shot and killed this animal. And when he got up on it, realized it was his ancestor Cain, and in his anger killed his son Tubal Cain for the mistake. And when he goes home, that's where Genesis picks up, and he says, if Cain was killed or cursed times 7, I'll be 70 times 7, because I killed a man, and in my anger a youth. That's what he was talking about. And Rashi, that guy I talked about earlier, he thinks that the cursing of Cain times 7 was a mistranslation. He believes that it was saying that God was saying that, telling Cain to not worry, that Abel's blood would not be avenged until the 7th generation. Because if you count 7 generations from him, you come to Lamech. Very interesting, to say the least. And Nebuchadnezzar, his transformation sounds a lot like a Bigfoot. His hair grows long as eagle's feathers, his nails as long as eagle's talons, and he's cursed to roam the beasts or the fields and eat the grass of the field like oxen. But I had a friend send me this TikTok, and I put it in the book, but this is on the roof of the Sistine Chapel, and it's so small you had to zoom it in, and I zoomed it up. But there's a cave on the Sistine Chapel, and it's right there, but I zoomed it up.
Yeah.
But right there is a hairy-looking thing. It looks like a Sasquatch, and then right in his face is another hairy thing with a single horn in its head, right in the center. I propose that is Esau and Cain, the 2 hairy men, and the 2 serpent seeds of the Bible.
I got the picture. When I went there, I took pictures. I got to see if you're not supposed to. I snapped a bunch of them. I got to see if I got that on there. Never even noticed it. I took pictures of the ceiling. Yo, if I got a good picture and have it, I'll send it to you too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's even
it's right there, man.
That's even another weird tie to the OTO somehow. Before he did that painting, the ceiling of that chapel was a black, dark blue sky with like pentagram stars, like a star that had like, hard to explain, but stars like that. That's the exact ceiling in the OTO lodges. Exact same ceiling as the Sistine Chapel. Before Michelangelo painted over. That's something weird with that. I don't know what's up with that.
COTO paying homage to Michelangelo and Vatican stuff? Is that what's going on?
Well, no. I think Michelangelo painted over the original. I'm talking about they're using the original. Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering if there was more. I don't know. I mean, again, like it's a Gnostic church, so I mean, in a sense, it is kind of pulling from Catholicism. In a sense, I do believe.
Sure, that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. I just find that, I like mentioning that when I get reminded.
Well, I thought there was something really interesting, Nick, that you said, but also I wanted to say the same that Justin said, was that about Syria. So we know that the jinn, kind of not my name, but the jinn of Islamic mysticism, that is a region, that Syria-Israel border, and Syria-Turkey border as well, that whole region has long been a hotbed of like jinn mysticism, or like these more antinomian kind of, like, maybe you could say they're folk cults, but maybe they're more Islamic, or maybe they're more Christian, or maybe they're more Jewish. There's a bunch of different ones. They're a mixture. It's like every little village.
Floyd was into Sufism
at one time. Yeah. But then also about the ceiling, like that makes a lot of sense, because if you think about like the original churches in that region, like the Syrian region, they're all domed churches, right? So every church would imply, like when you're looking up, that it would be a lapis, because that's the motif, is that dark blue stone. So it's the lapis, to tie it back to Ezekiel 28:13. So the lapis is the same as turquoise. That's why you often see turquoise on the outside of mosques or the outside of those medieval churches in that region, because it's the implication that day and night are actually the same thing. It's both clear, but it's just how we perceive it. So at night, like in a Gnostic mass, you're receiving the nighttime initiation. That's how I would interpret it. I don't know if that's a Gnostic way, but that's how I would say.
Thank you, sir.
It sounds interesting.
Yeah. All right. I think we could wrap it up here, honestly, if you guys are okay with that. Unless you got anything else.
For
You
sure.
know, again, like I said, like I don't want to pull too much out of the book as well, Doc, because you want people to check it out. So.
Yeah, there's 15 chapters, man. We just scratching the surface.
Unless there's anything else you want to bring up, you can. But I think we're good. We're good if you're good.
No, that's good, man.
All right, awesome. Yeah. You gave me a lot of things to think about. Actually, to be totally honest with you, there was so
And
much.
you guys have too.
So much
You guys
symbolism.
give me a lot of stuff I've not thought about.
That was just popping up in my head with occultism and the OTO, and I was just like, "Yo, what the? This is weird." Thank you though. Thank you. Like again, you really got me. You got my wheels going. Before we wrap it up, I'll let these guys plug themselves before we get to you, Doc. JJ, remind everybody again where they can find your amazing podcast.
JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD. Operation GCD live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern times. YouTube, Rumble, Twixters. And Fridays, hosted along with Nick of the Occult Rejects, and a conspiracy culture roundtable there at 9 p.m. Eastern times on the same platforms. Did I cut out? Am I back?
No, you're good. You're there.
Okay. And then anywhere podcasts are found, once again, JJ Vance, not the vice president. Do not vote for me in 2028. Host of Operation GCD. But great conversation there, Doc. I enjoyed your views of some of this ancient history, and specifically my favorite interest, the mounds. So I definitely enjoyed the conversation once again. So appreciate your time. And Nick, Jen, always great times. Appreciate the invite there, Nick and Jen. Always great to link up with you on some high weirdness conversations.
Hell yeah. Thank you, man. I always appreciate you joining us. And, tell you the truth, we might be better off with you for the next president. So I might write your name in on the ballot. And Jin the Ninja, thank you so much, my man, for joining us. Please let everybody know where they can find your amazing show as well.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nick, JJ, of course, and Doc Brown, Justin, Prometheus Lens. Amazing to work with you and to hear your narrative. I think it's a very interesting, and I love the history just in general. So thank you so much. I actually learned tons because I don't really know the biblical history that good.
Yeah.
So, but and I will be on JJ's show in a couple of weeks doing another Asian American occult movie review. Obviously, Nick will also be there, so
I can't wait for that.
I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, it'll be really fun. So it doesn't happen without your elder brothers in podcasting, right? So,
I know. You know what? I selfishly invited myself when I heard the movie. I was like, "Fuck, that was a dick movie."
Oh, well, that's why I brought it up to you, fellas, because I was gonna, obviously invite y'all to come do the review with me. Obviously, you guys got the occult expertise, especially with the Eastern mysticism there, and I just like to watch
China.
Eddie Murphy play Axel Foley in
Golden Child.
a murder mystery fighting a satanic cult, and I see a lot of esoteric stuff there in the Golden Child, but I don't know any of the occult business like you fellas do.
Yeah. Jin, you did do Big Trouble in Little China, though, didn't you?
Yeah. Exactly.
Hey,
we're doing a rehashing of basically the same era of films, right? This movie came out opposite Big Trouble in Little China. It was a competing studio project to that film, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, that was one of my, I would say, a golden episode for me, simply because a lot of my cool millennial literary friends who don't usually think I'm cool, they all watched that episode. So then they were like, "Oh, okay, Jin's kind of cool. We can fuck with him. We can go on his show." So yeah, I really appreciate that the opportunity for that, and thank you guys so much again. Really fun.
Of course. No, thank you, sir. And finally, Doc, I really appreciate you bringing your story to us. You got all of our wheels going here. That was really interesting. And again, for me, like Jen even said, I'm not that well versed with the history and like the names and just the storylines and the connections you made. Just really got me thinking about a lot of stuff I've come across before in the past. So thank you. Please let everybody know where they can find your amazing work, and let them know how they can get a hold of that book if they want, please.
Hey, first off, just thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. And I'm a big history nerd, man, and Bible nerd, and I like to go down the rabbit trails. And I normally can't openly have these kind of conversations because I'm kind of in the middle. I'm a Christian, but I'm a fringe Christian, and a lot of the stuff that I like to look at and talk about, I'm sometimes labeled a heretic. And the torches get lit and the crosses get built, and I try to get drugged to those hills and try to get burned at the stake at times. So I get to enjoy the openly and freely talk.
Does he
So I
weigh as much
appreciate
as a
it, guys.
duck?
Yeah, I didn't have to be talking and looking over my shoulders.
Right.
But no, I appreciate it, guys. But yeah, Prometheus Lens Podcast, the website's PrometheusLensPodcast.com. I'm on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you consume content, all the social medias. I drop a couple shows a week, but I do one every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We always do a live chat and a premiere there. And the book is on Amazon. You can get it on ebook for $10 or paperback for $20. I just got a large shipment today. I got 50 copies on hand now. You can go to the website and get you a signed copy if you'd like to. Just head on over to the website, PrometheusLensPodcast.com, or find me on one of my social medias and reach out, and we can get you a signed copy.
Yes, I was actually going to ask you to mention this. This is going to drop probably in a week, or almost exactly a week or 6 days from now. So, if you still got some of those, go check him out. Go hit him up. He's got autographed books. I saw you post that on Instagram today, actually. So I was going to ask you to promote that. Yeah, no, of course. So, if anybody's interested in an autographed copy, if you still got some left, go hit him up, especially on Instagram. For sure, get in touch with him there. He answers me, so... thank you again, Doc. I really appreciate it, and all your links will be in the bottom. Definitely have to get you on in the future. Maybe we'll actually talk some Bible stuff. Because, like my opinion, I don't try to shit on the book. I actually think there's value to it. I think some deep occulted, understandings are in there. So it's interesting to hear you tell it, and me start, thinking about the occult stuff. So that could be it may be interesting. Maybe we'll do that in the future or something. But yeah,
sounds good.
Thank you again, for real. I had a really good time, and thank you, Jin and JJ. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.